In the good times, anybody can make money. Making money in the bad times. People were buying everything at the highest possible price because we got a 3% rate, we have a 2% rate, we have a 4% rate. You know what? Rate is meaningless to me. The rate is a non-factor. It's the buy. I make my money at the closing table. When I sign the paper, that deal is done, I made my money.
Welcome to the Millionaire Mentorship Mastermind. I'm with Paul Carassone. Just kidding. Paul Carassone. I'm with Paul Carassone, the property boss. And you've seen him. He's from New York. And you're out of what? Poughkeepsie?
No. I'm out of the Hudson Valley.
The Hudson Valley.
Okay. Yes.
Tell me about yourself and how you became the property boss.
How did I become the property boss? I saw too many people out here trying to sell a dream that I thought was unobtainable. I saw a vacuum of truthfulness. Okay, where you know what, and where I was watching things, I was watching people project themselves and saying to myself, there is no possible way what they're spitting is reality, because I've been investing and managing real estate for 20 plus years, and I know what it is to live the life of a principal investor, an owner, and a manager. And then I see these other people talking the things they talk, saying this, you can do this, you can do that, and say to myself, nah, no way, man, you're lining yourself up for a sad ending.
Yeah, it gets you. I hear what you're saying, man. It almost gets you questioning, are you doing shit wrong? Like when I first started seeing the social media for a second, I'm like, wait. Am I doing this shit right? Like I've been doing this shit for 20 years, but am I doing it right? Because it looks like the way these guys are talking, I might be doing something wrong. And the numbers don't make sense. And this doesn't make sense. And so right before the show popped on, we were talking about like unit count and like how it really doesn't matter because guys will like own like 194th or 175th of 5,000 units for like as an LP and have never even flipped, bought, negotiated a property, but they put their cash in a deal and they don't know what it's like to be a real estate investor, but they're going to tell everybody they are. So I appreciate where you're coming from. Tell me about your story, your journey, how you got started.
It's a story, man. I started out as a kid, 17, 18 years old, knowing what it was like to have $0. Right. And growing up in a poor house. Now, my mom owned the house. My grandmother loaned her money to buy a house. So we had a house. And I mean, I didn't have a pair of shoes that didn't have holes in them. All right. Wow. I was no stranger to the electric company coming to turn off the gas in the winter. Back then, they turned it off in the winter. It didn't matter. So, you know, and we didn't have a lot. So I always knew from a young age that I was going to be involved in real estate. And I remember something super important that I'll never forget. My father asking me, and my mother and father were divorced, and my father asking me, Paul, what are you going to do with your life? I said, Pa, I'm going to be rich. Okay, I'm telling you now, I'm going to be a wealthy man because I can't live the life of somebody who's got to worry about the refrigerator breaking and no money to fix it.
Right.
If that's the case, I want to slide it outside and buy a new one. That's the kind of life I want to be able to live. Those are the choices I want. And you know what? From everything I see, I knew real estate was going to get me there. But I didn't have that avenue to get into it. You know, and then I remember going to Carlton Sheets, you know, seminars and trying to learn everything I could learn and buying
no money down. No money down. No money down.
And funny thing is, I was talking with somebody not long ago, and he said he did make me realize, like that first house that I bought it with no money down. I bought that house from my mother, okay? And immediately after buying the house, I went out and refied it and paid her in full for it because she had no mortgage on it. Right. So I was able to refi it. And I did this at about 18 years old. And I bought the house for what she paid for it at $14,000. Lived in the house for a good portion of my life up until about 20 couple of 20 years ago, maybe 23, 24 years ago. And then, I mean, through that life, I worked in supermarkets. And that's how I really started to get a business acumen.
What did you
Because
do? What did you do, Paul, at the supermarkets?
I started out, truth, at 9 years old. Again, I said we had no money. At 9 years old, I was working in the supermarket around the corner from my house, just going in there and rolling pennies. Rolling pennies. And then I remember one day the manager sees me rolling pennies. He says to me, Paul, he says, why you counted 50 pennies? He says, weigh them. This is what they're supposed to weigh. He says, because I can't tell you how many mistakes are going to be. Just weigh them. You'll never make a mistake. I said, Jack, thank you. His name was Jack. And I said, thank you much, man. I appreciate it. At 9 years old. And then I graduated from pennies to nickels, nickels to dimes to quarters to dollar bills. Learning everything. Learning that when new bills came in from the bank, the armored car, that they were in order. All the serial numbers were in order. So to count a $50 drawer to give out to cashiers, all you would do is spin it like you were doing a deck of cards until you see 50 or 49, and that would be the 50 mark. So now you got 50 here, 50 there. And you'd break it up simple, easy, and things like that. And then going into, I worked every place from the bottom to beneath the bottom in supermarkets. I remember going in basements with cockroaches and water bugs, man, baling cardboard. You didn't have compactors back then. We would bale them in baling machines, and you'd pick up these cardboard boxes, and water bugs run up and down you, man. It was nastiness. But then I eventually made it to porter. From porter to grocery boy, stacking shelves, things like that, to then a dairy department manager, frozen manager, and then working my way up. And then eventually, being one of the store managers. And that was a long houred life, man. You're talking 16-hour days.
Yeah.
You're showing up at a store at 6 a.m. and leaving sometimes at 10, 11 p.m.
Brutal.
It was a long life, but that whole time I knew I was going to be in real estate. And then I remember one of the stock boys asked me, he says, Paul, he says, one day you're going to be a manager of one of these stores. And I must have been about 18 at the time. And I said to him, I said, Dave, his name was Dave. I said, no way, man. One day you're going to call me Paulie Trump. Back then, Donald Trump was like the king of kings. He had a great name in real estate. He was the man. Everybody loved him. All right. And another funny story I'll add into this. And he sees me about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, yeah, on a Disney cruise. And he comes running up to me, grabs me on the back. He says, holy shit, Paul. I said, oh, Dave, man, what's up? He says, am I calling you Paulie Trump? He remembered. I said, as a matter of fact, man, you are. I said,
wow.
He said, you did it? I said, yeah, I did it. And I'll tell you this, I must have been it was about 1987, 1988. So I was around 19 years old. And I'm walking down with my girlfriend at the time. I'm walking down 6th Avenue. And who comes walking out of the building? Donald Trump. All right. And I see him surrounded by his security, and he gets right into the car. And he must have read my lips, because I said to my girl, I was like, holy shit, that's Donald Trump. Holy shit. And he looked at me and he goes like this. He puts on this big smile and he nods his head. And you know what? I tell this story, I still get chills. And I said to my girlfriend, I said, that's a sign. This is what I'm doing. That is the sign for me. And sure as shit, man, you know what? I've amassed a considerable amount, 50 some odd buildings, and I do well. The life.
You just kind of dropped that in there, man. That's amazing. So you're like that, you know what? What I heard a lot there, Paul, is just somebody who kind of grew up like me, like just, you get when you grow up poor. I didn't grow up. My shoes didn't have holes in them, but I had a lot of other things that were not going well, and I think what happens is it sounds like you got a good work ethic from somebody. I got mine from my grandfather and my mother. I would say, and no offense to my dad, but my mother and my grandpa have the best work ethic, and I did. That's what I saw, and you're looking for that path, right? Like as a young guy, you're looking for, I want this. I want to be rich. I was very clear, just as you were, as a young man, that I knew I didn't have, and I knew that what I wanted. I knew that all the guys who had it, especially when you're a kid and you see everybody's got a new bike and they got a new this and new that, and you got squatola or you got whatever was left over, and that's the thing I worry about with my kids is like they don't have that because they got everything. And I keep reminding my wife, I'm like, we got to be careful how much we give them because it's so real. But like when you tell me your story about your grocery store, it reminds me so much of my Red Robin journey. Like I worked in the restaurant industry I worked at Red Robin for 8 years, from 16 to 20. Yeah, I was a DMO, started as the dish machine operator and worked my way up to manager, just like yourself. And then, remembering those tips and everything being so great, but knowing, just like you knew that like this is just a part of the journey. But I think it's so important for people to understand that like just because where you're at right now is like not where you want to be, it's just part of your journey if you make a change. And if you take that right direction, that's what we're here talking about, is like how much your life changed, Paulie Trump, versus being, right? Like versus being the guy that didn't take that decision. So when did it become like, when did you buy your first like building, I guess?
Well, building. Okay. So now rewind a little bit back to Carlton Sheet Seminar.
Right.
And now I'm hooked. And I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And okay. I remember saying to people, this neighborhood is going to blow up one day. Well, nah, this neighborhood is nothing. Nah, I'm going to get it. Nah, you don't want to be involved in real estate. Real estate is nothing but aggravation. It's headaches. It's this, it's that. These were all the old school, the old timers telling you, stay away. That was crazy. Every one of them owned real estate, but telling you to stay away. So now I was able to pick areas. And I went to this Carlton Sheet Seminar, and I remember. Now, my father, back then, the Bronx was on fire. I mean, the city was giving buildings away.
Right.
Giving them away. And he managed to get into a building that was a total wreck. But he was also a carpenter. He was a union carpenter. So he was able to get in there, fix it. I don't remember what he paid for it, maybe $15,000 less. I mean, nothing. He paid nothing. And him and his wife, my stepmom, built a business. They bought that one building, and it was like 30 some odd units. But they weren't savvy. They were in the business and they were content and happy. Right. They were doing well, okay? And I remember then buying that house and asking my father, I said, Pac, listen, please, I need to buy this building. It was a 49-unit building on Grand Street off of Union Avenue in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. 49 units. They wanted like $699,000 for it. He says, all right, go stand in front of the building. Describe it to me. So I go that night, I go to the building, I stand in front of it, I take notes, I go back, I describe it to him. He said, it's 100 years old, stay the hell away from it. It's a dog. I said, okay, I will remember this. That building sold, I want to say about maybe 15 years ago for like 16.9 million. All right. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Right. So, I mean, in that, I went from supermarkets. I couldn't take supermarkets anymore. I wind up now getting into sheet metal, and I become a tin knocker.
What the hell is a tin knocker? It sounds like kind of a dirty word.
No, tin knocker is, ductwork.
Yeah.
Ductwork, air conditioning vents, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I start doing that for a living and saving money, doing what I have to do, And then I move. Fast forward, I move out of Brooklyn and I move upstate. And my father's up there. His wife just passed away. He didn't know the business end of the business. He knew the carpentry end of the business.
Right.
So my brother being now he's about 18 years old, and I'm about 20, 25, 26 at this point, and we wound up going in there. Now I never forget. I say to him, he says, Paul, come to this place, look at it. 70 units, 49 empties. He says we can't rent every month. Every month I'm paying the bills out of my money.
Yeah.
And he says, go over everything. I look at everything. I go back to him. I says, Pa, you're going to be broke in 4 months if you keep doing this. You will lose it all. He says, oh, shit, can you help? I says, yeah, I can help you. I says, you're going to lose everything. So now I forget about the air conditioning and I start going to work. Working with him, he's paying me $400 a week.
Nice.
$400 a week. I'm like, yeah, okay, this ain't going to last. I can't do this. So now I find out, I look around, I see the properties, it's in a bad way. And I remember saying to him, I said, Pa, you got to understand something. In the Bronx, you have way more asses than you have seats. So people will fill anything. Up here, you have a lot more seats than you have asses. And you need to give people something that they're going to be happy with.
Right.
And this ain't it. This place is a pig.
Yeah.
He says, so how do we fix it? I says, we got to borrow money. We've got to make this happen. What happens? 2007.
Right.
So now, right before that, he had some money. We were able to borrow some money to do the construction. Put about probably $1.4 million into it. We changed everything to stucco, and we made the place look nice.
Right.
And
this place is 70
units, 49 empties.
49. So you got a 21 cash flowing deals, and barely not keeping you're feeding the meter, and you guys dump a bunch of capital into this thing.
Yeah. So now what happens? 2007 hits. You can't borrow money.
Yeah.
I did have a lot of connections at different banks. So I remember being able to go to a bank where they said, okay, Paul, we know your reputation. We know you. We'll loan you the money. They loaned us money when nobody could get money. We were able to now do a refi on this place, do a cash out refi, pay whoever we borrowed the money from to do the renovations. We did that, and I refi enough where I can pick up a 76 unit complex. So now, and then right after that, an 80 unit complex. So, we were cranking, now it's my brother and I are now running things. And I said to my father, I said, listen, man, you got to understand something. I can't do this. I can't be doing this and going back and forth to the city running my business. So he, because at this point now I open up an air conditioning company. So I says, why don't we do this? Why don't we Mark and I buy the business from you? I promise you, you'll never have to worry about money again. And we will always pay you. He said, okay. He put the deal together, had the lawyers take a mortgage. He held the mortgage, and that was it. We owned the company. And from that company, from that one move, we own everything we own today.
Wow.
From that one move, I mean, yeah, we blew up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
And
so how did that help you transform your life to like going from, basically the bottom of the bottom, as you put it, to to in a very comfortable position?
here, I remember I'm obsessed with planes. I'm a pilot. I remember always looking at jets, private jets, always looking at jets. And every time they would fly overhead, I'd be like this and saying, I wonder who's in it. Now, guess who's in it? I know there are kids on the ground looking up, saying the same thing. Oh, shit, I wonder who's in it. You know what? I'm in it. Why? Because I made the right moves. I took the lickings. I got involved. I learned the lessons. But I kicked all the no's out of the way and found all the yeses.
Right. Yeah, it takes determination for sure.
Yeah, man.
It's one of those things that, like, when you're trying to build your own legacy, and just speaking of being a pilot, I don't have what it's cut out to be a pilot. I went through the same type of situation. The 2012, when the market slowed down for me, because I was actually in the perfect situation. I had moved to Las Vegas during the foreclosure crisis. You mentioned 2007. I moved there in 2006 as a realtor. So I saw the writing on the wall quickly, and I had bought 2 investment properties. But I turned that around and going from 2 bad investments to selling 2,200 properties as an agent to bail myself out. But after that whole foreclosure meltdown was done, I had like, what do I do now? Right. And so I'm like, I want to learn how to become a pilot. Right. I have this void to fill. And so, because I was like, yeah, I want to start flying around, fly myself here, fly myself there. And I couldn't afford like my own pilot or anything like that. And so I went to take pilot lessons, and, I was very nervous, and I still don't like to fly. And so I did it. My guy's like, you're ready, man. You're ready. It's time to solo. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just, and I think that boils down to a lot of people is like, I looked at things and I'm like, all right, now, Troy, I need to forget about learning how to fly the plane because I'm not doing that. Like, I need to go and get the pilot to somebody else to fly the plane because I'm not comfortable with myself flying the plane. And that takes a different, it takes a different individual. Like, it takes somebody who enjoys that. That's not me. I get stressed out flying the plane. Now, I like going fast, okay? So, like, in cars on the ground, but I know the recovery from a plane crash it's very... Yeah, I mean that whole flight, the whole dance they do on airlines where they're like, "Hey, if we have an it's like, come on, we're toast, okay? So let's just like, why don't they just show the explosion?"
Yeah, let's stop pretending.
Yeah, but it just goes to like show you that like you actually put that in your mind, you manifested it, and now you got it, right?
You know what? I know this. The only thing stopping me from succeeding is me, nothing and no one else. And that happens to be the case with everybody. You get bogged down with the little things. That's the problem with people. They get bogged down with shit that they should not even let get in their way.
Like what? Like let's talk about that because I think that's so true, and so many people are suffering from the same thing. And like whatever, it's like their mental block or their mental like I can't do something or I'm not good enough or I don't deserve it or I don't like or like people are going to judge me. Yes, all of that is true, but like the way you develop the confidence in the person you are is by doing it and showing yourself you can. Right?
Yeah, you've got to do it for yourself. People becoming an entrepreneur is a major event in anyone's life. Getting that mindset to just be an entrepreneur, to open your own business, the courage that it takes, the will that it takes to do that, you've accomplished a lot to even just say that you did it. All right. You've accomplished once you manifest it into an actual product. All right. Whatever that product is, you sell widgets, you sell hot dog buns, hot dogs. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
You've dropped your pants and you're ready to work. Okay.
That's it.
That itself says a lot about the person doing it. However, don't think for 1 second that it is not easy to lose. It is so easy to lose it all.
Yeah.
The fear of the memory of where I came from keeps this fear alive in me that's a place I never want to go back to.
I got two fears. That being one, and the other one I'll be 100% with is the federal government. Like, I do not ever know. Like, you watch what's happening with Mr. Trump in New York. Like, people don't understand. They think that this guy committed a crime, and we can argue that point 100 different ways. But the bottom line is the government is a threat in business, and anybody who's in big business understands and knows that.
And you have to know enough to look for it. If you just sit around and say, "Holy shit, why me? Why me?" You know what? No self-pity. Get rid of that self-pity shit and go find it.
Yeah.
Go find it, figure it out. Today, we have access to more information than any other time in human history. You mean to tell me with a couple of keystrokes you can't find things? Come on. Man, I could find anything.
Yeah. It's, let me ask you this. Like, I always consider myself, like probably ego driven more than anything. Do you find yourself like, and then from real estate, like, I think when I reflect on like the bad decisions I made, I'm like, that was an ego decision. So where do you find like your motivation, or like where you're getting like at this stage of the game, you got enough, you know what I mean? Like, to kind of get up there and do it all over again, right? Same day, repeat or keep it. Where are you finding like your motivation from?
That's built into the person. You have to have that. The person who has, let's call it fire in the pit, is the same person who doesn't have self-pity. Okay? That is not the person who sits around and says, "Why me?"
I think it's programming though. I think you can change if you say it's built in. I agree to a certain degree, but I think you can build it in. Like, if you don't have it, I think you can go get it. But you have to completely change who you are. And I don't know if everybody's able to do that. And that's
Who
a very
can do
hard.
that?
Yeah, not a lot of people, but there are some, right? And I believe there's hope for people is what I'm saying. Is if you are a victim and you decide that you're done becoming a victim and that you really want to take action and you actually want to determine your own future versus relying and blaming everybody else, then and start having self-pity, and you decide that like, I'm going to stop being that person. Like, listen, for me, if I identified as an alcoholic, which I haven't drank in 17 years, but like believing that I could stop drinking and then knowing that it's possible to be someone else, where sometimes your identity is this person, right? So I believe, like what you said, that you are born, a lot of guys are born like you and me with the hustle, where it comes internal. But I think that it can be built if the person 100% commits.
Here is 90% the biggest problem. Been in the same job for 30 years, 40 years. Me, take a look at me. I worked in stores, supermarkets, grocery stores, working 12, 13, 14-hour days, making enough money to have a life, to be able to buy a house, raise a family. But the upward movement was going to be gradual and limited at best.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, how many people become comfortable with that life? How many people then sit around at night wishing they can do something and then turn around and say, "You know what? But what am I going to do? Am I going to leave my job? I can't leave my job." They talk to their wives, their husbands, whatever. "Babe, I'm thinking about doing this." "Well, you know what? We have to pay this bill. The taxes are due. We've got, and then they fear themselves out of existence, and
Right.
they don't want to conquer their comfort. Think about how important that is, to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. Nobody
It's
wants
tough. It's tough.
Yeah, man. And that's why people don't move. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you a story, then other people who do find themselves going into a position, then they put these when people come to me with a plan, I chuckle. When you put so much detail into a plan, I don't laugh at their face, because I will never tell somebody that what they have is a bad idea. Never will I ever do that. All right. However, I maybe will point out the what ifs. Well, have you thought about this, and this? I will not say your idea won't work. I will just point out some of the things that can go wrong. But here, for example, I remember in one of my properties, I have a restaurant bar, and the owner of the restaurant, we had just bought the building about 7-8 months prior.
Right.
And the guy was about 4 months behind. So now I'm like, talk to my brother. I was like, yo, we got to do something here, man. He says, yeah, we're going to start the eviction, blah, blah, blah. So I go and see him. I don't remember his name. I don't even remember the name of the store, the name of the restaurant. I go over and see him. I said, hey, Bob. I says, have you thought about maybe trying this and trying that and trying this? You know what he came back to me with? I never, ever were able to figure this answer out. Oh, but that wasn't in my business plan. And I looked to him and I said, oh. So you mean to tell me going out of business was part of your plan? I mean, when you're in business, man, you've got to think on the fly. Your plan is not worth 2 cents, because things will change. And if you can't change with them, you're dead in the water.
I couldn't agree more. Like, you have to, it's weird to say, but you got to have 100% conviction in yourself and be adaptable and willing to change.
Hell yeah.
Like, you got to stay the course, but also be aware of the obstacles, and understand that, like, you're evolving, right? It's about evolving, right? Like, kids they crawling, they're getting familiar with themselves. They learn to get a little bit of balance, a little confidence, and they fall down the stairs. They may lose it a little bit, but like, it's about building that confidence, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So, Paul, I see that you're kind of a flashy guy, a little bit.
A little.
Tell me about that. You got like a Rolls Royce and some other things. Tell me about.
I've got 2.
The guys who've got the Rolls Royce, like, everybody loves my daughter knew what a Rolls Royce was, and I'm like, you're 10 years old. How do you know what a Rolls Royce is? People love Rolls Royces. Why do you love them so much?
Okay, so here was the deal. I could be a bit of an asshole, and when I say that, I'm like a child. I can be like a child at times. I've had all the cars. I've had the Lamborghinis. I've had the McLarens. I've had the Porsches. I've had them. And I found myself every time getting behind the wheel, putting them to the test. Because the second you drive around in a Lambo or a McLaren, you're an F1 driver. And that car's got ability. That car has way more ability than you do as a driver. Okay? So the second you want to test that car, you out of your space, man. You are. And I found myself driving these cars way beyond my ability as a driver.
Right.
And I knew I was going to get hurt. Time to get rid of them. I had motorcycles when I was young, and I knew the last thing I should be doing was ride a motorcycle.
Right. Agree.
The last thing I should be doing was ride a motorcycle. I'm flying down the street, doing wheelies, acting a fool. No, I got off the bike one day. I walked it home, and I sold it the next day. It hit me that I will die on this thing. And the same thing with the cars. I remember having a McLaren on the top of my lift and a Lamborghini on the bottom of my lift in my garage. And just walking into the garage to look at them, because knowing if I was going to drive them, I was going to do something stupid.
Really?
So you know what? I got rid of them. Of them.
Downgraded to some Rolls Royces.
I did. You know what? And I of course, you want the luxury items. What are you going to do? You have the money.
I don't even know what a Rolls Royce costs. Like, I haven't ever even, like, I know there's different models, but I know they're like 3, 4, 500 something thousand. They could go up from there. I don't know. Like,
Troy, if I told you neither do I, does that make me sound like an asshole?
No, just means you don't obviously care. So yeah, I mean, that's all that means. I don't ask what a piece of cheese costs. So you know what I mean? Like,
I understand that. Believe me, I go grocery shopping with my wife.
yeah.
Why? Because I want to be in touch with what's really happening. I want to know what's happening at the supermarkets because there is a direct link, okay? A direct link between what's happening in the supermarkets and what's happening with my tenants. You know, it is so interconnected that you see how your tenants are then hurting. Listen, I tell you this, we never, ever, ever kabong our tenants with increases because we know how difficult it is to find affordability. We give increases, of course, but they're $20 increases. You know, it's stuff like that. It doesn't even keep up with the costs of running the property. However, when you have turnover, we do get the increases. You know, we get the better increases. But to the tenants in place, we go easy on them because we know what it is to displace them. We don't want to do that, man. We're not those guys.
It's a better strategy, like honestly, because a turn costs you so much more.
Yeah.
Like keep the rents low and keep them in there forever. You know, and like that's the way I look at it. Like,
yep.
You know, small. If you need it, it's like, all right, this person's been in. I had a tenant call me the other day in one of my commercial properties. He's like, "Do you want a lease?" He's like, "Can I get a lease?" I was like, "Why? You're month to month." You know what I mean? He's like, I was like, "It's gonna go up if I do a lease," and he's like, "That's fine. I just want a lease." I was like, "Okay," you know. So,
of course, he understands. He knows what he's got. He doesn't know what he's getting.
Yeah, right.
And that is the truth.
I think it's so. I think you and I have very similar relationships. You got to have as a landlord, you got to have a good relationship with your tenants. You have to be. I read this in a book a long time ago. It said like you got to be in business, especially in the commercial space. You need to be in business with your tenants. They need to succeed. It's important to have great tenant mix, and I believe in that. Like when I look at a tenant, if they're a competitor, I'm not going to bring them in there on the commercial side unless I've ran things by it. And I kind of look at how things feed off of each other. Do you look at that stuff, Paul?
No, I do not believe in having a good relationship with my tenants. I believe in my office having a good relationship with the tenants. Okay? Yeah. Because the second you start to develop that friendship, you start to develop a let's call it an opening, an entrance for then you to hear every problem. Then you become their hairdresser. You become their hairdresser, their bartender, the person they spill all their problems to. And now when you think about it, if you got 100 units, how many tenants do you have? You cannot confuse tenants and units. People do that. No, if you've got 700 units, you could potentially have 2,100 tenants. You don't know because every person in the building, every person in the apartment is your tenant. They may be the child of the primary, but they're still a tenant. Okay? Yeah. And you've got to make sure that they're living there the best that you can provide. And, you also got to look at the best they will allow you to provide. Because you've got tenants who don't tell you anything that's going on in the apartment. We send out letters. We send out emails. We send out texts to tenants saying, if there's anything wrong in the apartment, please let us know. Contact the office directly or contact your super. Why? Because we understand what happens through the eviction process. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
All of a sudden, you evict somebody, all of a sudden, you're in court and there's 100 different problems that you never knew about. So what do? We get that in writing on paper or on a screen somewhere saying they said there was no problem. Now there's a problem? No, don't work that way.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify when I mean myself, I mean my team. Like, I just mean it as a landlord, as a property owner. I think that whatever kind of core values you have, I think part of that should be to exemplify through your team to be a good relationship, but not to be the bartender, not to be the waiter, not to be that person. Yes. And I understand that. I still have those tenants who I've had for, 15, 16 years that still contact me just because they've contacted me for 15, 16 years, no matter how many I reprogram and say, hey, and you can never scale if you're dealing with every tenant. But my point was, it sounds like you are big in transparency and big in having a good relationship with your tenants, and I think that's how you keep properties full.
We try to keep the relationship with the tenants that allow that relationship to flourish. Okay, then you get the tenants who don't want to be bothered, who don't talk to you, who could care less. They don't need to know us. Fine. And you know what? There's a lot of times I walk onto a property. I'm intimately involved with every property I own. I go there on a daily. Okay.
Oh, I get that about you. Like, there's not one thing I get, but your personality. So I can just see, I can see if you own the restaurant, I can see you coming through there, checking you just seem, because you got this New York persona. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Listen, I go in there. I want to go and see what's going on. I want to walk the properties and see where the problems are. What needs to be fixed? What are we missing? And there's the thing. Typically a lot of people, especially business owners or employees of a business, they get tunnel vision. When you're in a place all day, every day working, you get tunnel vision. It takes an outsider to come in with the peripheral to see actually what is really going on, because you're too busy finding the problems that stick out rather than looking for the problems that aren't obvious. That's where I come in. I'll walk onto a property. I got a super on every one of my properties. I've got some properties, I got 2 and 3 supers, and I'll walk the property and I know there's 100 things I'll pick out on a property that the super not is bad at his job. He's just too busy to see it. He's running around with a list of things to do and running right by a problem that is obvious, but not obvious to the person who's on a mission. That's where I come in.
And you look after your stuff differently than other people are going to look after it. You know what I mean? Like, it just is the way it is. It's your stuff. I get it. Like, I like to look at my stuff. I like to walk my properties. And when I'm there, there's always a list that comes back every time I look at a property. It's like this, that, the other thing. It's out of sight, out of mind. And if you're not looking at stuff, and you come over there, don't be surprised if the property's messed up.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one property, and the super is fixated on doing certain work in the basement that nobody goes to. Okay, you've got areas of the basement that are huge areas that nobody's in right now, but I can walk upstairs and look around the grounds and see 100 different things to deal with.
Yeah,
but he's fixated on getting that done. You know what? Take care of that. And then get back down there, because again,
but Paul, there ain't no people in the basement, and I could get.
But Troy, I could tell you this, and getting back to people always ask, number one question: how many units do you have? Well, what is a unit? Is a unit a measurement of rent, or how many apartments do you have? What is unit?
For me, this is the way I measure things. If I'm collecting rent from that, that's a unit.
That's right. And then, so now here, same building, 75 units, apartments, okay? No, 71 apartments, 5 garages, okay? But now, what about all the corrals in the basement that pay me rent? The corrals are storage corrals. In other words, what we do is I see this big space. What do I do? All right, give me a 4x4, shoot them down into the floor. I get 2x4s in a 4x4 block, shoot them into the floor, build them up, shoot them into the ceiling, chicken wire clasp, done. Now it's a storage unit. That what happens? I get $100 a month for. Okay.
Well, so people have no idea what that does to your NOI and what that does to your capital. So what he's talking about, just to if you're a neophyte, or even if you're not a big investor, the reason why that's so important, it may not. crush his cash flow. But what it does to the value of the building is, I mean, each parking space or each $100 is like, I think it's at a 5% cap is like almost a $36,000 profit value.
That's right. All
Yeah.
right. So now, and what does it do? More importantly, it's a vacancy eraser. The money that you'll lose in a vacancy or a non-payer is made up by that stupid little 4x4 box that cost you about $150 to put together. You will now crush that vacancy. So if you have an empty apartment for a month, it may take you a year to make it, but guess what? You made it.
Yeah, I think a big thing that a lot of investors, especially newbie or younger or whatever, they don't know how to identify profit. What you're telling me is like, I like the way you are, because I'm the same way. It's like, if we can make money, why are we not renting this out? Where's the profit there? You know what I mean? And there's a lot of times, like, you just have to use your brain to figure that stuff out. It's a simple thing. And the other thing I would argue is it makes it more convenient for your tenants versus them having to go somewhere else to store their crap. They just go right here, which makes them stay longer.
Yep. All right. And then, you know what? Now what? What are they going to do with their junk? They're going to put it in the hallway and create a fire hazard? No. Out of the hallway downstairs. Thank you. You've got two choices. You can put it in your pocket and trip over it, put it in your apartment, trip over it, get it out of the hallway, or put it in the basement or get rid of it altogether. Those are your options. Not two choices. That was four choices, but you get the picture. And you have to.
So Paul, I know we're getting kind of short on time, but I wanted to ask you a couple like questions for like people who are listening right now and they're trying to get to your level. What would you tell them to do? What would be the first step that you would tell them?
Educate yourself and then start. Get out of your own way. The biggest problem people have is not finding a deal, is not getting the money, is themselves. They can't get out of their own way. They don't know where to start, how to start. You know, here, funny thing, if I may.
Yeah,
my first book just was released a week and a half ago. It made #1 bestseller. Should have listened. Why is it should have listened? Evicting real estate myths. Why evicting real estate myths? Because everybody thinks that real estate is easy. The second you realize it's a job, you are ahead of everyone else. The second you realize you got to get in there, you're ahead of everyone else. I'm working on another book now. This one just was released a week ago. The next book I'm coming out with, the name of it is Now What? Why now what? Because, okay, you finally decided you want to get into real estate. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what? Okay, yes, you made that decision, but now what do you do from here? You know what to do. You've got to identify the market, identify the budget, study the market, know that market cold.
Yeah,
and
he's right.
For anybody who's looking to invest, if you have money in your pocket, then what you need to do is find the right deal, then deploy that capital. Find the right deal, learn where you're investing, learn the industry, and then deploy the capital. If you're starting out with nothing, learn the market, learn it, get the education, talk to people, find a mentor. These are the things you need to do. Invest in your education. The money will come. Be patient. This is not a race. Real estate is not a race, man.
It's the equivalent, or it's the, I guess it's the definition, the epitome of slow and steady wins the race. Because with real estate, even the mistakes over time are covered up. And like, I've made plenty of them. I'm sure you've made plenty of them. And it's like, oh, wow, it's been 5 years and that property, that mistake, everything has been corrected because time and distance. So, Paul, how can people follow your journey? How can people who are trying to see what you're about? How do they order your book? Is it on Amazon?
My book is on Amazon, and the name of the book is Should Have Listened: Evicting Real Estate Myths. Or follow me on social media and you can just comment or DM me book, and you get the link sent to you automatically. And
Nice.
if you want to follow me on social media, it is _property boss.
on all the socials?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes. And you know what? Except YouTube. YouTube is just straight up the property boss.
Nice. Okay, cool, man. Well, I've appreciated you sharing your story. I appreciate you telling your journey. One final question, like how tough, I mean, New York gets a pretty bad rap for being a landlord, but it is one of the most expensive real estate markets and most desirable real estate markets in the world, right? And so how are you dealing with the taxes and the rent laws and all of that? Like, how do you just kind of suck it up and say, hey, the ends justify the means? Or is there a point in time where you say, like, do we just move everything down to Texas or Florida, you know?
Well, here, there's no short answer here, you know. But New York is and always will be the number one real estate market on earth. It is and always will be. It always goes through changes. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It has its ebb and flows. People move to Florida. I'm one of them. I went down to Florida. You know what? People have a tendency to fall in love with a place. Then they go, like getting married. You fall in love, you get married, you have a honeymoon, everything is great. And then you start farting in front of another. All right. You start going to the bathroom in front of one another. And then what? You know what that person's really made of. Now the lies come out. All right. And it's the same thing about Florida. People love it. I love Florida, but I can't live there.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's just constant changing things. And the real estate market in Florida is not all it's made out to be, man. It's in big trouble. Remember, I said this now. Florida market is in big trouble.
Well, they got to control those insurance costs for sure. If you cannot control that insurance cost, that's an X factor. Like, I mean, it's like, man, like I've talked to, and I'm a big fan of no leverage or there's little leverage as possible. And, when I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm great, but they never factor in their insurance going up by 5 times or the interest rate going up by 4 times. And, a lot of people who are big shooters and big talkers, you're going to see them instantly disappear overnight on social media. You're going to see that, all these guys who had multiple units, you're going to see them gone like it was nothing, like a flash in the pan. But if you're built to last and you build your property portfolio right, you can basically be indestructible because you're like Paul and myself. You're so damn scared of losing it.
Well, if I may,
yeah,
you said you're not a big believer in debt. I am a big believer in debt. When used properly, deployed correctly, don't just borrow, over leverage, overpay, because there is the recipe for failure and disaster. All right. This is an industry that is super unforgiving. Once you've made the mistake, they snowball. Okay. Now you've stuck with people who bought in the good times. In the good times, anybody can make money.
For sure.
It's making money in the bad times. People were buying everything at the highest possible price because we got a 3% rate, we have a 2% rate, we have a 4% rate. You know what? Rate is meaningless to me.
Yeah.
The rate is a non-factor. It's the buy. I make my money at the closing table. When I sign the paper, that deal is done. I made my money. Okay?
That's it.
And I always underwrite my deals at 7 and 8%. Why? Because historically, that was the 20-year average.
Yeah. And you're not wrong. It's just smart to be what I mean is I'm not a big fan of over leveraging and, and too many people are pushing debt. And it's like, yo, let's get back to the basics, right? Like you got to plan for the bad times. You got to plan for things not going according to your plan, according to your business plan. And like roll into most properties at 20% occupancy like you did. And once you figure out how to solve those problems, you become a different investor. I think if you're a problem solver like Paul is, and you're a hard worker like Paul is, you'll become a property boss like Paul.
Paul, Troy, think about the people so desperate to make a deal, they pay anything. So now what do? They find all different crazy programs to be able to afford the deal. So the deal is overpriced. They know they shouldn't do it, but they have to have it because they're in love. So what do? To make the deal make sense, they take out stupid programs like interest only. They do IO loans. Okay? IO loans, they waive appraisals, and now what happens? They've overpaid. They ain't going to cash flow when that thing comes home to roost. And now what? If you're not a savvy investor, if you're not disciplined, you're not going to be making those principal pay downs. Okay? You're just buying time to make that deal work. That is not the way to do this, man. An interest-only loan is designed people use it as a design to make the impossible deal possible. That is something I stay away from. If the deal does not work with 25% down and 75% leverage, I run for the hills. I want nothing to do with it. I don't buy a pro forma deal because I've never seen a pro forma I didn't fall in love with.
That's so funny. You know what? I think that's a great part to wrap up on because it's just so true. So many people, and these are the guys who get killed, the guys who are good at the Excel spreadsheets but have never spent a fucking day in a basement, never had to deal with an angry tenant, but they sure know how to talk banker. And all of a sudden, they don't want to talk banker. Banker's like, well, that's a great pro forma. The numbers don't lie. Well, yeah, they do if you don't know a construction budget, or if you don't know that this guy's robbing you blind over here, or this is going to get screwed up over there. So I'm with you on that, man. It's been a nothing but a pleasure having you on, guys. Make sure you go buy Paul's book right freaking now. It's called Should Have Listened, and I love the slogan, evict your beliefs, or what is it?
Evicting real estate myths. Evicting real estate myths.
Buy the book, give him a 5-star review. I'm sure he put his heart and soul into it. And I know it's better that you buy books from guys who actually have done stuff versus guys who are talking about theory, right? And it's so cool to see, a lot more people write books and tell their personal stories. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And give him a follow. Make sure you guys give this podcast a 5-star review, share it with a friend, and definitely take action. Be better than you are today, right?
That's it, man. That's it.
Appreciate you coming on, brother, man. And you let me know if there's anything that I can do for you ever, for sure.
Troy, I thank you. We'll speak again. You be well. And if anything you need from me, please reach out, man. Reach out.
Cool, brother.